The first person who congratulated me on my divorce was my neurologist. I hadn't even told him I was getting one. He looked at my chart, looked back at me, and quietly said, "Mr. Bennett, I'm relieved you finally came." I had no idea what he meant. Neither did I know that my wife had already destroyed our marriage to get me into that room. If stories about family secrets and impossible choices keep you listening, subscribe. There's always another truth waiting at the end. The night I caught my wife kissing my best friend, it wasn't raining. No dramatic music, no crowded restaurant, just the glow of the garage lights spilling across our driveway. I had come home early because a training exercise had been canceled. My truck rolled quietly into the driveway just after 7:10. Their cars were already there. That didn't seem strange. Owen Carter had been walking into my house without knocking for almost 15 years. He knew where the coffee mugs were. My wife knew how he took his burgers. Our families had spent holidays together. Trust isn't built in grand moments. It's built in thousands of ordinary Tuesdays. That's why betrayal never feels loud at first. It feels familiar. I carried my lunch cooler toward the side entrance. Halfway to the door, I heard laughter. Not unusual. Then silence. I reached for the handle. The garage door wasn't fully closed. There was a gap of maybe 8 inches, just enough to see inside. Rachel stood beside Owen. She had one hand on his chest. He leaned down. She kissed him. Not by accident. Not out of surprise. Long enough that neither of them noticed I was standing there. I remember the ticking of the wall clock more clearly than the kiss. 7:12. For some reason, my brain decided that mattered. Even now. I still hear that clock. I didn't burst inside. People always ask why. I don't know. Maybe because 18 years of marriage don't disappear in 5 seconds. Maybe because part of me was waiting for someone to laugh and say, "We got you." Instead, Owen rested his forehead against hers. Rachel whispered something. He nodded. Then she started crying. That confused me more than the kiss. If they were happy, why was she crying? Looking back, that question should have mattered. Instead, I convinced myself she was crying because she got caught. I drove away before either of them saw me. I don't remember the first 20 miles. I only remember stopping outside a gas station. My phone buzzed. Rachel. I stared at her name until it stopped ringing. Then another call. Then another. Finally, a text. "Please answer." Another. "This isn't what you think." I laughed out loud inside the truck. There isn't a sentence more useless than that one. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. This time it was Owen. I ignored him too. By midnight, they had called 31 times. I answered none of them. The next morning, Rachel was waiting on the front porch. She hadn't slept. I could tell from the way she kept rubbing the sleeves of her sweater over her hands. I unlocked the front door. She didn't move. "I deserve this," she said. "You're right. I need you to hear me. I already heard enough." It wasn't. She stopped herself. I watched her swallow whatever explanation she had been about to give. "You can hate me." "I do." She nodded slowly. "I know." What she said next made absolutely no sense. "I just need you to promise me one thing." I almost laughed. "You're asking me for a favor?" "Please." "What?" "Don't cancel Thursday." I frowned. "What happens Thursday?" She looked genuinely surprised. "You don't remember?" "Remember what?" Her face lost its color. Just for a second. Then she recovered. The appointment. What appointment? She stared at me as if I'd spoken another language. You've been waiting 4 months. I have no idea what you're talking about. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Oh." Not, "I'm sorry," not, "Please forgive me," just, "Oh," as though she had suddenly realized something that frightened her. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small white envelope. "You'll need this." I didn't take it. She set it on the porch railing. "If you throw it away." She stopped. Then everything I did was for nothing. I looked at her, then at the envelope, then back at her. "You cheated on me." "Yes." "You destroyed our family." She closed her eyes. "Yes." "And now you're talking like you sacrificed something." A tear slid down her cheek. "I did." That was the moment I became certain she'd lost her mind. Or worse. She thought I had. I left the envelope on the porch. I couldn't even look at it. There are moments when anger becomes so heavy that even curiosity feels like a betrayal. This was one of them. Rachel watched me walk inside. She didn't try to stop me. She only said one last thing before I closed the door. "You've forgotten more than you realize." I slammed the door hard enough to shake the picture frames in the hallway. At the time, I thought it was another manipulation. I would spend months wishing I had asked one more question. I called my attorney that afternoon. By Monday, the paperwork had already started. Rachel never argued. She signed everything: the house, the savings, the retirement accounts. She barely looked at the documents. My lawyer actually stopped the meeting. "Mr. Bennett?" He lowered his voice. "I've been doing divorces for 26 years. I nodded. "I've never seen someone give up this much without negotiating. I don't care. You probably should. I don't." He leaned back. "Either your wife feels incredibly guilty, or there's something happening that neither of us understands." I stared at the stack of papers. She cheated. I know. That's all I need to understand. He didn't argue. He simply slid the documents toward me. I signed every page. 3 days later, I returned to work. Firefighters don't ask many personal questions. Not because they don't care, because they know you'll talk when you're ready. Or you won't. Either way, they'll still hand you a cup of coffee. The station felt strangely quiet. A few guys nodded when I walked in. No one mentioned Rachel. No one mentioned Owen. That lasted almost 15 minutes. Then Captain Lewis called me into his office. He closed the door. "How are you holding up?" "I've had worse days." He studied me. "When's your neurology appointment?" I frowned. "What?" "Thursday." My stomach tightened. "What appointment?" Now he looked confused. "The one occupational health has been reminding you about." "I don't know what you're talking about." Lewis opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, flipped through a few pages, then stopped. "Huh. What?" He turned the folder toward me. There it was. My signature. Authorization for neurological follow-up after smoke exposure. Dated 4 months earlier. I stared at it. "I don't remember signing this." Lewis smiled politely. "I was standing right here." I looked closer. It was definitely my signature. No question. "You joked that hospitals smelled worse than burning warehouses." I couldn't remember saying that. Not even a little. That bothered me more than Rachel. Because people forget conversations. They don't usually forget signing medical documents, especially ones that involve specialists. On Thursday morning, I still didn't go. I drove halfway to the medical center, then turned around. I convinced myself everyone was overreacting. I wasn't sick. I was 48. Still climbing ladders, still running drills, still passing every physical fitness test. I was fine, or at least, I wanted to be. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Instead, I answered. Mr. Bennett? Yes. This is Dr. Naomi Ellis. The name meant nothing to me. I'm calling because you missed today's appointment. I know. We'd really like to reschedule. I don't think it's necessary. Silence. Then she asked a strange question. Do you remember meeting me in October? No. You've met me twice. I frowned. No, I haven't. Another pause. Then she said gently, I think that's exactly why we need to see you. I hung up. For almost an hour, I sat alone in the kitchen. The white envelope Rachel had left was still sitting on the counter where I'd finally tossed it after bringing it inside. I picked it up, turned it over. My name was written across the front in Rachel's handwriting. Nothing else. No return address. No explanation. Just Grant. She almost never used my first name when she wrote notes. Usually it was, pick up milk. Dinner's in the oven. Love you. Never. Grant. Something about that bothered me. I opened it. Inside was only an appointment card. Neurology. Thursday. The appointment I'd missed. On the back, she'd written one sentence. Please don't make me lose you twice. I crumpled the card. What did that even mean? Lose me twice? She had been the one who walked away. She had been the one kissing another man. Yet somehow, she kept acting like she was the one grieving. The following Saturday, I stopped by my daughter Ava's apartment. She hugged me before I even knocked. You look awful. Good to see you too. She smiled for the first time in days. We ordered pizza, watched half a baseball game, pretended life hadn't exploded. Eventually, she muted the television. Dad. What? I need to ask something. Go ahead. When was the last time you saw Mom before everything? The night I caught her. She frowned. No. I mean before that. I don't know. Probably breakfast. She looked genuinely confused. You don't remember dinner with us? What dinner? 3 weeks ago. There wasn't a dinner. Dad. There wasn't. She slowly reached for her phone, scrolled through photos, then handed it to me. There I was, smiling, Rachel beside me, Ava across the table, 4 plates of pasta, the timestamp read, 23 days earlier. I stared at the picture. I don't remember this. Ava laughed nervously. Very funny. I'm serious. She searched my face. Then the smile disappeared. You really don't. No. She swiped to another picture. This one was outside the restaurant. I had my arm around Rachel. She was laughing. I couldn't remember that either. Not the meal, not the drive, not the conversation, nothing. A cold feeling settled in my chest. Ava whispered, Dad. Mom cried in the parking lot that night. I looked up. Why? Because you introduced yourself to the waiter. I blinked. So? You'd already met him. I felt the room tilt. You asked his name 3 times. My mouth went dry. And afterward, she hesitated. Mom sat in her car for almost 20 minutes. What did she say? Ava looked down at her hands. She said, He's disappearing while he's still standing next to me. For the first time since I saw Rachel kiss Owen, I wasn't thinking about the affair anymore. I was thinking about everything I couldn't remember. And for the first time, I wondered if the only person who had been lying to me was my own mind. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I missed Rachel, because I couldn't stop looking at photographs I had no memory of taking. There was one of Ava blowing out birthday candles, one of me standing beside a grill with Owen flipping burgers, one of Rachel laughing so hard she had one hand over her face. I remembered owning the blue shirt I was wearing. I remembered the backyard. I even remembered buying the grill 5 years earlier. I remembered everything, except the day itself. That terrified me more than the affair ever had. At 6:30 the next morning, I drove back to the medical center. For the first time in months, I kept the appointment. Dr. Naomi Ellis met me herself. She looked to be in her early 50s, calm without sounding rehearsed. She didn't rush me. She didn't open my file immediately. Instead, she asked, "What made you come today?" I answered honestly. "My daughter showed me pictures from a dinner I don't remember." She nodded once. "I was hoping you would come before that happened." Before I could ask what she meant, she opened my chart. "There are some things we need to discuss." The testing lasted nearly 4 hours. Memory exercises, reaction times, balance, word recall, brain imaging, questions that seemed almost childish. "What day is it? What did you eat yesterday?" Repeat these 5 words. I grew irritated halfway through. "I fought structure fires for 23 years. I know. I've passed every department physical. I know. I'm still working. I know." She folded her hands. "Mr. Bennett? Grant. Grant." She paused. "Brains are very good at hiding damage." After the scans, she returned carrying a thin gray folder. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she asked, "Do you remember the Riverside chemical fire?" I did. How could I forget? 8 firefighters trapped, exploding solvent tanks, nearly 9 hours inside rotating crews. 2 men hospitalized. 1 retired early because of lung damage. I was there. You were exposed to unusually high concentrations of combustion toxins. We all were. Not equally. She slid a report toward me. "Your helmet camera showed your mask lost its seal for almost 6 minutes. I stared at the page. I never saw this. You weren't supposed to. What does that mean? The department completed its investigation. Then why am I here?" She finally looked me directly in the eyes. "Because 6 months ago you began showing early neurological symptoms." I felt strangely calm, not relieved, not afraid, just quiet. "What symptoms?" She read from the report. "Short-term memory loss." I nodded slowly. "Mild language interruptions." I remembered forgetting Chris's name. "Spatial disorientation." "The wrong turn driving home last fall." "Recurring headaches, every morning." "Phantom smoke odors." Rachel asking whether I smelled burning. Every single clue suddenly belonged to the same story. "This isn't dementia," I said. "No." "Alzheimer's?" "No." "What is it?" She took a slow breath. "We believe it's delayed toxic encephalopathy." The words meant nothing to me. She must have seen that. "It doesn't happen often." "Can you treat it?" "In many patients." She chose her next words carefully. "Early treatment significantly slows progression." My heartbeat sped up. "And if I ignore it?" Silence. That silence lasted maybe 3 seconds. It felt much longer. It usually becomes much harder to recover lost function. Recover. Not cure. Recover. I understood the difference immediately. I drove home with the folder sitting unopened on the passenger seat. Rachel had known. That much was obvious now, but another question refused to leave me alone. If she knew, why hadn't she simply told me? That evening, someone knocked on my front door. I already knew who it was before opening it. Owen. He looked exhausted. He had lost weight. His beard had grown in unevenly. For several seconds, we just stood there. Finally, he said, "I heard you went to the appointment." I didn't answer. "So you know." "I know I'm sick." He closed his eyes. "Grant, I still don't know why you kissed my wife." He flinched. "I owe you that." "No." I shook my head. "You owed me that 3 months ago." He accepted that without arguing. "I know." We sat on the back deck because neither of us wanted to be inside the house. The old wind chime Rachel had bought years ago kept tapping softly against itself. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, I asked, "When did you find out?" "The day after your first collapse." "You knew before I did." "Rachel wanted you to hear it first. So why didn't I?" He looked toward the fence. "Because you walked out." "What?" "You walked out of Dr. Ellis's office." "I've never met her." He looked at me with genuine sadness. "You have?" "No." "You've met her 3 times." My stomach tightened. "No." "The first appointment." He swallowed. "She explained everything." I stared at him. "You're lying." "I wish I was." He reached into his jacket, slowly, carefully, as though approaching a wounded animal. He placed a folded piece of paper on the table between us. "What is this?" "Your discharge summary." I unfolded it. There was my name, my birth date, Dr. Naomi Ellis, initial neurological consultation. Date, almost 4 months earlier. My signature sat neatly at the bottom. "I don't remember this." "I know. I would have remembered hearing I had brain damage." Owen looked at me for a long moment. "No." He spoke so quietly, I almost missed it. "You didn't." "What?" "You left that appointment convinced the doctors were wrong." He rubbed both hands together before continuing. "For 2 weeks, Rachel begged you to go back." "I would have." "No." His answer came immediately. "You canceled every appointment." "I don't believe that." "I didn't either." He pulled out his phone, scrolled, then handed it to me. It wasn't a text. It was a voicemail. My voicemail. My own voice filled the quiet backyard. "Rachel, stop scheduling appointments." "I'm fine." "If you call that neurologist again, I'm not going." The message ended. I couldn't breathe. I didn't remember recording it, not even hearing it. "She tried everything," Owen said. "Talking. Arguing. Crying. You kept saying everyone was treating you like you were already dying." I stared at the wind chime moving in the breeze. "So," I whispered, "why the affair?" He didn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, he reached into his wallet, pulled out a folded photograph. Rachel, sitting alone in a hospital parking lot, head resting against the steering wheel, date stamped in the corner, the day after my second canceled appointment. "I took that picture," Owen said quietly. "She didn't know." "Why?" "Because she stayed there for almost 2 hours." "What was she doing?" "Trying to figure out how to save a man." He looked directly at me. "Who refused to believe he needed saving." I looked at him. He looked back. Then he said the sentence that made my entire marriage stop making sense. We never had an affair. I laughed, a harsh, bitter laugh. I saw you. I know. I watched you kiss her. Yes. Then don't insult me. I'm not. He leaned forward. Grant, that kiss happened. He paused. But it happened for a reason you'd never imagine. I wanted to throw him off my deck. Instead, I heard myself ask the one question I never thought I would. What reason? I didn't answer Owen. I couldn't. Every instinct I had was screaming that he was trying to rewrite what I'd seen with my own eyes. You kissed my wife. Yes. You held her. Yes. You let me believe you were sleeping together. He nodded. Yes. Then don't stand here and tell me there wasn't an affair. There wasn't. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. You've got 5 seconds. I know. Then start talking. Instead of answering, he reached into his coat again. This time he pulled out a thick manila envelope. I've carried this for 3 months. I don't want it. I know. He placed it on the table anyway. But Rachel said you'd eventually be ready. I almost threw it into the fire pit. Instead, I opened it. The first page was dated 4 months earlier. Neurology consultation summary. The second page was worse. It was addressed to Rachel. With the patient's permission, I stopped reading. What permission? Owen looked at me. The permission you signed. I never signed anything. You did. I would have remembered. His eyes filled with something that looked almost like grief. Grant. That's exactly what Dr. Ellis was trying to explain. Inside the envelope were copies of every appointment I'd forgotten, every MRI, every cognitive assessment, every recommendation, every missed follow-up. One page had my own handwriting across the bottom. I don't think anything is wrong with me. Another. Cancel next month's appointment. Another. Return to work immediately. I recognized my signature every single time. I remembered writing none of it. Near the bottom was something else. Not a medical report. A yellow legal pad. Rachel's handwriting. The first page read, October 3rd. He forgot where we parked after dinner. He laughed about it. I laughed too. Then I cried in the bathroom because I knew it wasn't normal. Another page. October 18th. He forgot Dr. Ellis's name before we reached the parking lot. Another, November 2nd, he canceled another MRI. He said everyone was trying to make him feel old. Another, November 21st, he promised Ava he'd come to dinner. He never showed up. He cried afterward because he thought she had canceled. I couldn't keep reading. Every page made me look less like a betrayed husband and more like a man quietly disappearing. I looked up. She could have shown me this. Owen nodded. She did. What? You read every page. No. 3 months ago. I shook my head. No. You sat at your kitchen table. He pointed toward the house. Right in there. You read them. You accused her of making them up. I felt my stomach twist. You tore half of them apart. Neither of us spoke. The wind chime tapped softly again. Finally, I asked, so why kiss her? His shoulders dropped. Because nothing else worked. I stared at him. He continued. You ignored doctors. You ignored your captain. You ignored your daughter. You ignored Rachel. He looked down at his hands. The only thing stronger than your pride was your anger. I didn't interrupt. Rachel kept saying, if he believes I've betrayed him, maybe he'll finally stop pretending he's invincible. I closed my eyes. No. She hated the idea. No. She cried before we did it. No. The kiss lasted maybe 5 seconds. He swallowed. She threw up afterward. My hands were shaking. So the restaurant. There was no restaurant. The garage. She knew you'd probably come home early. I remembered the canceled training exercise. No one outside the station should have known. Unless Rachel had called. The garage door was left open on purpose. Every piece suddenly shifted. Not changed. Shifted. The tears. The sadness. The strange silence after the kiss. Her refusal to defend herself. The phone calls. The envelope. The appointment. Everything that had felt wrong had been wrong. Just not in the way I believed. I destroyed my marriage. The words came out before I realized I was speaking. Owen shook his head. No. She did. No. I signed the papers. Because she wanted you alive. He looked directly at me. Rachel told me something the night before. What? If he hates me enough, he might finally choose himself. I covered my face with both hands. For months, I had replayed that kiss. Again, again, again. Now another image replaced it. Rachel sitting alone in her car outside the hospital, trying to decide whether sacrificing 18 years of marriage was the only way to save the man she loved. 3 days later, I drove to the small apartment she'd rented across town. The moving boxes were still stacked against one wall. She opened the door before I knocked. For a second, neither of us moved. You went back, she said quietly. I nodded. I've started treatment. Her shoulders relaxed, not dramatically, just enough that I realized she'd been carrying that tension for months. I'm glad. Why didn't you tell me the truth? She smiled sadly. I did. What? Over and over. I don't remember. I know. Silence settled between us. Finally, she whispered, Do you remember asking me the same question 6 times in one evening? I didn't answer. Do you remember accusing me of hiding your truck keys while they were in your pocket? I looked down. No. I stopped knowing which version of our conversations you'd remember. A tear rolled down her cheek. So eventually, I stopped trying to convince you. I stepped inside. The apartment was almost empty. One couch, a folding table, a coffee mug sitting beside a stack of unopened mail. That mug hit me harder than anything else. Rachel never drank coffee from mismatched cups. At home, she always used the blue ceramic mug I'd bought her during our trip to Oregon. She had left it behind. She hadn't taken the comfortable life. She hadn't taken the house. She hadn't even taken her favorite mug. She had only taken enough to disappear. I don't know how to forgive this, she nodded. I know. I don't even know if I should. I know. You let me believe. I know. She didn't defend herself. Didn't ask for another chance. Didn't ask whether I still loved her. She simply stood there, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her. Finally, I asked the question that had been waiting since the night in the garage. Were you ever in love with Owen? She answered before I finished speaking. No. Not even a little. Never. What about him? She gave the smallest smile. He hated every second of it. For the first time in months, I believed her. The divorce stayed final. Some things couldn't simply be undone because the truth finally arrived. Trust had still been broken, even if the reason had been love. Rachel never asked me to marry her again. I never asked her to. Instead, every Thursday morning she drove me to my neurology appointments. She sat in the waiting room with a paperback she almost never read. Sometimes we talked afterward. Sometimes we drove home in silence. Neither of us knew what our future looked like anymore. But one Thursday, nearly a year after the divorce, Dr. Ellis smiled as she reviewed my latest scans. The progression has slowed. I looked toward Rachel. She was sitting exactly where she always sat, holding the same blue ceramic coffee mug I'd quietly returned to her a few months earlier. She caught me looking. I smiled. She smiled back. It wasn't the smile of a husband and wife. It wasn't even the smile of two people who knew whether they would ever find their way back to each other. It was something quieter. Two people who had survived the truth. And for that morning, that was enough. People like endings that tie everything into a neat little knot. Life almost never does. A year after my diagnosis, I was still divorced. I was still seeing Dr. Ellis every month. I still carried a notebook, because sometimes I forgot why I'd walked into a room. The difference was, now I admitted it. That turned out to be harder than any treatment. The fire department retired me 6 months later. Not because I couldn't do the job, because one day I paused in front of the engine and couldn't remember which compartment held the medical bags. It lasted maybe 15 seconds. 15 seconds is nothing, unless someone is waiting for you to save their life. I handed Captain Lewis my helmet before anyone had to ask. I think it's time. He looked at me for a long moment. I think you already knew. I nodded. So did Rachel. A few weeks later, I found a cardboard box in the hall closet while cleaning out old paperwork. Inside were birthday cards, ticket stubs, vacation brochures, a tiny seashell Ava had brought home when she was 9. At the very bottom sat a sealed envelope. My name, Rachel's handwriting, no date. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single letter. Grant, if you're reading this, then one of two things happened. Either you're finally willing to look, or I'm no longer here to explain. I hope it's the first one. The doctors told me not to argue with your memory. They said facts wouldn't always win. Love doesn't either. So I stopped trying to prove things. I only tried to keep you alive long enough to remember yourself. If one day you hate me less than you do today, that's enough. If you never forgive me, I understand that too. Just promise me one thing. Don't miss another appointment. Love, Rachel. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I had forgotten the words, because for the first time in a long while, I didn't want to. I called her that evening. She answered on the second ring. Everything okay? It struck me that she still answered my calls that way, not with suspicion, not with distance, just concern. I found your letter. Silence. I wasn't sure you ever would. I should have read it sooner. You weren't ready sooner. I laughed softly. I guess not. Another quiet pause. Then she asked, how was therapy today? Hard. Good. I finally admitted I'm angry. At me? At myself. She didn't rush to comfort me. I know. Over time, we built something neither of us had expected. Not the marriage we used to have. That version had ended the night she chose to become the villain in my story. The new version was slower, more careful, more honest. Sometimes we'd have lunch after my appointments. Sometimes Ava joined us. Sometimes we spent entire afternoons talking about ordinary things because ordinary conversations had become precious. We never pretended the pain hadn't happened. We simply stopped letting it be the only thing in the room. 2 years later, Ava got married. She asked if both her mother and I would walk her down the aisle. Rachel immediately looked at me. Only me. If you're comfortable. I smiled. I think she'd like both of us there. Ava cried before either of us did. At the reception, Owen found me near the coffee station. I wasn't sure you'd want me to come. I wasn't sure either. He nodded. Fair enough. We stood there in silence for a while. Finally, I held out my hand. I'm never going to like what you two did. I know. But I finally understand why. He shook my hand. Neither of us tried to say anything bigger than that. Some apologies don't erase the past. They simply make the future possible. These days, I still have reminders on my phone. Medication, appointments, birthdays. Some people see those alerts as proof of what's been taken from me. I see them differently. They're proof that I stopped pretending I could fight everything alone. Every Thursday morning, I still drive to the clinic. Sometimes Rachel meets me there. Sometimes she doesn't. Life has its own rhythm now. Not better, not worse. Just honest. Last month, after another appointment, I walked back to the parking lot carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. Rachel was leaning against her car, reading a paperback she'd probably read 3 times already. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. You remembered. I smiled and handed her the blue ceramic travel mug she'd left in my truck the week before. I remembered. She wrapped both hands around it for warmth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sun was just beginning to break through the clouds. Cars pulled in. Cars pulled out. Life kept moving. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to move with it.